Mercedes has dominated Formula 1 for the last 6 years, and it has now revealed the car everyone will be trying to beat in 2020, the W11. Before we analyse the images we've seen from the car's shakedown at Silverstone, it's worth noting that Mercedes has said it will not repeat its 2019 trick of bringing a whole new design to the second week of F1 testing. Last year, the team caused a stir when it arrived with effectively a new car thanks to a comprehensive aerodynamic overhaul for the second Barcelona test. But technical director James Allison says that was because of the front wing rule changes that came in for 2019. While Mercedes will bring upgrades between now and the first race, Allison says repeating last year's trick would not make sense as the regulations are more mature. In the final year of a rules cycle, teams could be forgiven for making only subtle tweaks to their new cars, but Mercedes has made major changes at the front, middle and rear of the W11 to make sure it doesn't run out of development steam this year. Let's focus on those major changes first. The most visually obvious difference to last year's car is the side pod shape. Mercedes has followed the trend of moving the upper side impact tube to its lowest possible position. This allows the radiator intake to be moved higher and rearwards, meaning there is more room for the wake coming off the front wing to be influenced by the aggressive side pod leading edge undercut. Behind the intake, the side pods sweep down dramatically. It wasn't so long ago that McLaren tried to be revolutionary with its doomed size 0 design for Honda's comeback in 2015, but this style of bodywork is now the norm in F1. Tighter packaging brings a risk of problems running the car in hotter conditions, but Mercedes' engine department has worked to increase the operating temperature for this year, reducing the cooling burden. The second major change is in the front suspension, where Mercedes says it has introduced more structural complexity for higher performance. The most noticeable feature here is the very short push rod, which connects to the upright a long way from the upper and lower wishbone axis. This gives the car a significant change in ride height with increased steering lock. All teams are trying to find ways to do this, but Mercedes' approach is one of the most interesting we've seen. The system also helps alter diagonal weight transfer with steering lock, which can improve traction coming out of the corners. Mercedes says its third major change for this year is in the rear suspension, where it has gone for an adventurous layout in order to free up new areas for aerodynamic development. The key here for all teams is to keep the suspension components out of the way as much as possible to prevent any disturbance to the airflow. Allison says that each of those major modifications would have been solid improvements on their own, but Mercedes hopes that combining all three will allow it to make bigger aerodynamic gains as it adds more developments to the W11. Looking at the rest of the car, for its launch Mercedes has retained its front wing concept from last year. The small slot gap at the inboard end of the fourth wing flap means Mercedes can't have its top flap swoop down in the same manner as those below it, because the rules only allow 5 sections longitudinally. Swooping these elements downwards helps manage the airflow coming off the inner end of the front wing flaps. It dissipates the pressure differential between the upper and lower surfaces, meaning the wing can work harder without creating as much turbulent air that would affect the aero performance of the rest of the car. The W11 retains Mercedes' spoon-shaped nose design, accompanied by the cape that was pioneered by the team and dubbed the Super Ted cape in-house. This looks slightly more aggressive than Mercedes has used in the past, but it has not been taken to the level of complexity we've seen on the new Red Bull. Above the driver's head, the air intake is sloped forwards. This means that any airflow spillage will be pushed downwards towards the bottom surface, where it can be managed by the undercut that is also designed to control the airflow coming off the top of the driver's helmet. Mercedes has always avoided following the trend of designing a high rake car, where the ride height is greater at the rear than at the front. Adapting to that concept involves a lot more than just raising the back end, as it would completely change the aerodynamic profile of the car. This could explain why the slots in the Mercedes floor differ to most of its rivals. The W11 features small slots all at an angle, while teams running higher rake have longer slots in line with the floor's outer edge. This is because the larger gap underneath the car requires a different approach to create an airflow seal. Mercedes' rear wing features several turning vanes on the lower edge where the wider and narrower parts of the end plate meet. There are not as many vanes here as we saw on the McLaren, but Mercedes is likely to have several different designs during the season, so this area, like the barge boards behind the front wheels, could become more complex. The number of major changes Mercedes has made to its car shows it is determined not to hit a point of diminishing returns in 2020. The team is expecting a three-way fight with Ferrari and Red Bull, and that meant that simply evolving its 2019 design would not have been enough.